Hey HTDA, and today we're going to once again expand on our pretty awesome and organized looking facility in order to get access to yellow science. Yellow science, once we unlock it, will give us access to pretty much the remainder of the technology tree with the exception of a few items down here, so that's going to really bring us into the true endgame. Okay, so remember that space station up in the sky that we were talking about and connecting to in the very early parts of the game? Now this is actually where we're going to need to go, or specifically where we're going to need resources from in order to actually start producing that yellow science. And in order to do that, we are actually going to need to connect to the space station, and in order to do that, we need a radio tower, and you can see the base building that I've already put down over here. Now, this thing by itself is not the actual radio tower, we need to expand that, and in order to do so, we have this little modular builder planner that we can open, and then we can kind of fiddle around with this. Now, this thing is actually going to need power, so we can click on one of these things to the side and add a power connector to that. And then we can start expanding this building. Now, I'm a little bit puzzled by this specific design because the way it works is you just add some middle parts. But because I need to have at least 3 middle parts and at most 3 middle parts, that means, well, I'm just gonna have to add, you guessed it, 3 middle parts. And then I need to connect a top part to this as well. Now, why this thing doesn't just build itself exactly like this because it's the only configuration it will actually accept, I don't know. It's probably supposed to let you construct it piece by piece if that's what you want to do, because it's fairly expensive. But there's not much else that you can do at that point anyway, so I don't see the point, but this is how that works. And this is the massive size this thing has once you actually place it down, like I just showed you. Now you can tell from the rest of my factory, this building is huge. It actually makes the elevator, the space elevator in Satisfactory, in some ways at least, makes that look very small, although technically that is a space elevator that is actually going all the way up in the sky. But this thing, well, long story short, is huge. Now, how do we actually build this? Right, so I actually forgot to mention that in order to make that construction ship, you also need to make some maintenance drones. And you don't need a huge amount of these, so what I would recommend you doing is just set up an assembler like I've done over here, collect the 4 different materials that you need in order to make some maintenance drones, and then just dump them in and it will start producing some of that. Now if you put the maximum amount in here, it will produce more than enough drones for our purposes right now. Later on you might want to start automating this. But for now, honestly, making sure that we're not just dumping all our energy cell production into maintenance drones is probably a safe thing to do, because we also need that for other things like, say, solar panels. In order to do that, we are going to need a construction ship, and I already placed it down over here. I just put a little bit to the side of my factory because this thing is actually pretty big, but something else is even bigger, and that is the warehouse we're going to need in order to supply the construction materials. So if I check the warehouse content over here, so this is a warehouse dedicated to construction materials. As you can see, this will allow me to put 25,000 construction materials in here. Just as a frame of reference, the actual radio tower only needs about 5,000, so it's a lot more than you actually need right now. And what this will do is this will allow the construction ship to pick up the construction materials, and then that construction ship is going to bring it all the way over here to the construction site, in this case the tower. Now we're also going to need those construction materials as well as the construction ship for a couple of other things later on, but first things first, we need that radio tower up and running. The construction material is actually something you cannot handcraft, so you need to put it in a assembler in order to start making it, and it actually uses 6 different types of resources. So we need plates, we need steel beams, we need advanced machinery parts, we need concrete, polymer boards, and electronic components. Now the good thing is we are already producing all of this. So from that regard, it's actually fairly easy to start making this. However, we are not necessarily producing a huge amount of steel beams and advanced machinery parts, because those things are being used, well, pretty much in everything that we're currently making, including the science. And we also could use a little bit more electronic components, so that is something I'm going to be working on. It's also worth noting that even though the fact that you need 5,000 plus of these construction materials sounds like a lot, you're actually going to be producing 320 per minute if you can have one of these factory assemblers, just producing it non-stop. And if you look at the actual contents for this production, you don't actually need a huge amount of everything in order to do that. So 5,000 construction materials sounds like a lot more than it actually is. Alright, so like I said, we're not necessarily producing a huge amount of steel right now, and we actually do need the steel that we are producing for other things as well, including the advanced machinery parts that we also need in order to make the construction materials. So why not start making a little bit more of all of that? We already have a ignium ore node that we're not fully using yet. We have the xenoferrite ore over there as well, which we are also not completely utilizing, so it's about time we start doing exactly that. The investment from the previous episode, where we already set up some of that production in the miners, is going to pay off really quickly now, because we are just bringing in the ignium ore over here. We're combining that with a belt of xenoferrite ore. Once again, we had 2 of those lifts in order to get 2 full Mark II belts up and running really easily. And as you can see, I'm just crushing the ore now and smelting it into steel. So this is a very smooth and easy production for the steel, which is now flowing into this depot over here for the moment. Similarly, we already had the production line for the plates over here, which we aren't actually completely using. So what I've done now is I'm splitting off about half of this production of plates, and actually in practice it's going to be a lot more than half, because as you can see, the plates that we were using elsewhere we weren't really using that much of. And those plates are being transformed into machinery parts over here, and then we're combining that with a part of our steel production in order to make advanced machinery parts. So as you can see, I now have a depot over here that's collecting some of the residual plates, some advanced machinery parts, and then the steel over here, which is 3 of the 6 items we need in order to make those construction materials. With those main bottlenecks out of the way, we can start making some construction materials. Now, some of you are going to hate me for this, because after all, this is kind of a factory automation game, but just because you can automate everything doesn't necessarily mean you should. Similar to my dislike of a mole in a lot of these games, which is a lot of investment in terms of setting up with a pretty low return on time investment. Basically, the same holds for the construction materials. What I've done over here is just set up 6 different containers, which I can fill up with a huge amount of resources, like I've done over here with the boards. Do that for every single resource, and that will give me so much resources ready to go feeding into this single assembler over here, that's actually going to make thousands upon thousands of construction materials without me ever having to refeed these containers once again. Now, of course, at some point they will be empty and I do need to actually refill them, but the time investment of refilling these containers compared to having 6 different belts feeding into this single assembler all across my entire facility, not just the spaghetti that's going to create, but just the time investment of actually building all of that. Honestly, I think you're just better off doing it simple for now. Now, in the long run, you might want to think about optimizing this, but for now, we only need like 5,000 of these construction materials. And again, that's just running this recipe something like 15 times, and that's actually not even a full container worth of materials of each different material. Now, with all of that in production, as you can see, just a single recipe completed for the construction materials gives you a huge amount of the stuff, so that's pretty awesome. However, you might be wondering why the tower is not yet being built, and that is because we actually need a different type of ship in order to transport our goods, which is where the transport ships come in. And these transport ships, as you can see, pick up the goods from the warehouse and will transport them all the way to the tower. Now, just like the construction ship over here, the actual transport ships, you build them actually at bit 4 at a time. The size of the platform is about the same as a warehouse. So we now should see 4 of our ships, yep, there they go, flying with their goods towards the actual radio tower and dumping the goods. A little bit colliding there, apparently, but they are dumping the construction goods on top of the tower, so that can now start constructing, which also means, yep, there we go, that we should see our construction ship now flying over to the tower in order to start actually building the thing. And once it arrives, as you can see, it drops the little construction drones out, and those are going to actually start building the thing. Now, I do have to say, other than the fact that actually initially constructing this thing is a little bit weird, the actual construction process looks pretty damn cool. Not entirely sure how shooting lasers at the radio tower is going to build it, but the fact that they're flying around and doing all kinds of stuff and just in general moving around, it's pretty awesome to look at. Alright, so I don't know about you, but the actual constructed radio tower looks pretty good, so well done, a little construction robot over there. There's no animation or anything like that once the actual construction is done, so you didn't miss anything in terms of awesome looking animations or anything like that, but the actual constructed facility is pretty damn cool. What's also pretty cool is actually climbing to the top of your tower and just looking down on your facility. Now I know I've already been showing you this view using the camera flight movement thing that you can kind of use from the developer tools, but this is a non-cheaty way to do the exact same thing, and as you can see, just look at that shadow, it's huge. It's pretty awesome to have this standing in the middle of your actual factory and just looking out over everything that you're creating. However, this is not where we actually need to be, because what we actually need is this little screen all the way at the bottom. Now, in order to make sure your radio tower does anything, you need to actually enable it. Kind of seems like logical, but there is a good reason you might every now and then want to shut this down, because it actually uses a huge amount of power. Thanks to all the power production that we have up and running. It's not really a problem for us, but just something to keep in mind if you do have some power issues every now and then. And then we can actually open the communications tab. Now, initially this was a little bit counterintuitive, but basically what's happening here is that we can start repairing the hull of the space station. And then we can also start adding in some solar power to actually power the station once again. And once we've done that, we can repair the sales platform. Now, what this actually does is we can upload or send up some of our more advanced recipes in order to sell that stuff at the station. There is going to be a trader arriving at the sales platform, picking up that stuff, and then we're going to be basically earning money, but the money is going to come in the form of the thermalite bars that we need in order to unlock the next type of science. Now, at this point, the story, in my opinion, breaks down a little bit, because I'm not entirely sure why we're repairing a station and not just sending out a SOS signal and then just having those people that visit the station rescue us from the planet or anything like that. But I guess we're just here to make money and build a factory, so it's all good with me. Now, once you start the repairs, the transport ships will once again start taking construction materials from the warehouse, and then they will start flying up to the space station. Now, you might be wondering why they're flying in this direction. The place that they actually enter and leave the map is exactly on top of your landing location. So even though it looks like the space station is over there and they're flying in this direction, it doesn't really necessarily make sense. It is a good reason why you want to keep your transport ships fairly close to your starting position, because this is the place that they will be flying to in order to do their job. So make sure you keep them close, make sure that they have the minimum amount of travel time. So if I really wanted to completely optimize this, I should actually have built my transport ships maybe something like over there in the back, and the warehouse right next to it or something that would even reduce the travel distance a little bit more. However, as it is, it's not that far away, but you just don't want to build this on the other side of the map. Now, at this point, there isn't that much to do other than wait for those repairs to be completed before we can actually move on. So I might as well use that time in order to expand my power grid as well as my available resources. Talking about the power grid for a moment, there was someone in the comments that mentioned last time, well, the batteries are not actually going to do anything, but that's not completely true. The high voltage grid is actually being prioritized over the low voltage grid. So you can actually see my burner generators are not doing anything right now, but my steam turbines are actually working and my batteries are actually being drained. So right now my solar panels do not have access to the sun just yet. So I am using quite a bit of power from the batteries in order to get my factory up and running. As you can see, I'm nowhere near storing enough power for me to actually get through the day, although it's not that bad. As you can see, I'm still draining the batteries and the sun is almost coming up. The main problem here is that the actual outputs of the batteries, so not the amount stored in them, but the actual output of the batteries that they can get into the system is just not high enough to feed a significant part of my factory. talking about significant, the radio tower is actually taking up 10 megawatt of power compared to the about 30 I'm actually using. So this is over one third of all the energy I'm currently using. So again, you might want to turn this off if you have any power issues. Now, on a different note, someone was actually asking me in the comments last time why I was digging with dynamite and not just with the elevator. The honest answer is I had no idea that you could actually do that, because the game isn't really clear about telling you that, at least not as far as I could tell. So the way that works is you can just place down an elevator. You don't even need to power it. It's really strange how that works. Then you can configure the elevator. So this is basically the default floor. So we are going to call this the top. This is at a height of 130. Now the node down here that I'm standing on top of is around the level of 110, but you cannot actually drill down through ore. So what you need to do is stop a little bit higher than that. So let's say we call the bottom at a height of 115. You don't get any error. If I do go lower than this, so let's say I do 110 for example, I get some errors, there's stuff in the way. So 115 it is, and I say confirm, and then the actual elevator will start drilling down. No power needed, no idea why this works like this and the freight elevator doesn't actually work like this, but it's a pretty convenient way to get a hole in the world. Once your elevator is done building, you can actually just get in and press the button, and then as you can see the doors will close and you will actually start going underground. So it's a very easy way to reach a relatively low level underground. Once you get there, you will notice however that you are completely surrounded by rocks, so you will then still need to resort to some dynamite exploding. Luckily that doesn't actually blow up your elevator, otherwise it would be quite annoying to get back. But as you can see, we are now right on top of our nice little resources that we need. The main problem is that the elevator is kind of in the way now, so I am actually going to be removing it. But if you place it slightly to the side of where the actual ore is, then of course you can very easily just put your miners up, put some freight elevators in here as well, and then just use your lift to get all the way back up. Alternatively, you just remove the elevator and you build a ladder, because you're going to need to bring power down there anyway somehow as well. So I've been using the same hole in order to do exactly that, and then just bring the ores up with some freight elevators like we've done before. Now, as you probably just saw, we were actually digging down to a Technum ore node because, well, we only had the very first starting node that we mined. That's pretty much the first thing that we actually did. It's not quite running out. You don't use Technum ore in the same amount as you do use the Xenoferrite, for example, that ran out a long time ago by now. But we are going to need some more of that anyway at some point, so we might as well use our time to be productive. Specifically, we know we're going to need a huge amount of electronics from this point forward. So what I've been doing over here is just put some smelters and crushers in here in order to make some rods, then turn those rods into wires, and then turn the wires into some more electronics. And as you can see, I almost have an entire stash full of that, which is non-stop producing at the moment, and I'm not actually being used for anything else than me just bringing that back into the manual facility all the way in the back over here next to the warehouse in order to make some more construction materials, but I can also use these for whatever else we might need them for. Something else I did afterwards is just expand the massive solar farm that we already had with mostly, well, quite a few solar panels actually, but also with a huge amount of batteries. So as you can see, they're currently charging with 15 megawatts. So that also means that we have a huge amount of storage in terms of power now. So if we actually do get to the night, then we will actually be able to supply a lot more power to the system with the use of these free solar energy batteries. Anyway, in the meanwhile, we completed the hull repairs, the solar panels, as well as the sales platform, and I'm now starting to work on upgrading the construction drone base, so anything else we build after this is going to go a little quicker. However, the most important thing is that we do actually have the sales platform up and running, which also means we now have the sales tab over here. Now, what you can see is over here that we have some trade ship arriving every now and then, basically. There is currently no thermalite bars in the storage in the space station, but we are also not selling anything. And specifically what we could be selling are those maintenance drones that we started to construct at the beginning of this episode as well. And I've been doing that in the background as well, so we actually have a fair amount of those stored up. In order to actually get those maintenance drones to the space station, we're going to need, yes, another warehouse. And to be honest, all these things kind of look the same. I am looking for the actual thingy. Yep, here we go. I'm probably going to have to turn this around. But anyway, for now, what we can do is we can put some maintenance drones in here. And then the transport ships will pick them up and start flying them to the space station. And the space station will start selling them. And then, in order to get the thermalite bars that we get from selling our drones back to our planet, we're going to need, once again, another warehouse. This time around, we can configure it. We can say, bring those thermalite bars right here. This is actually quite close to where we are producing our science. And we should see our transport drones lifting off, flying to the space station over there, and pick up whatever bars there are that we got from our sales. Interesting note, you can actually see that we repaired several parts of the space station and added some stuff like solar panels to it as well. So it's a nice visual detail, so you can actually see your progress in that regard as well. So the relatively small amount of drones that we just sold actually gave us almost 1,000 thermalite bars, and that means that we can now start setting up some science production, because all we need for that is the circuit boards, the energy cells that we already started producing last time around, add the thermalite bars to it. And if you look at the ratio in the recipe, for every 4 thermalite bars that we are making, we are going to get 1 science pack. So it's actually a pretty decent ratio already. We actually need a lot more of the resource that we are producing ourselves. So you don't need a huge amount of maintenance drones in order to get your initial science production in this part of the game up and running. Now, I did actually automate my yellow science production, and I've done that by just connecting the energy cell and circuit board production that I already had to some belts. And as you can see, we are now kickstarting our yellow science production. In the end, this is something that you're going to want to scale up a little bit further, because, well, you're going to need a huge amount of science for the last few technologies. But for now, this is going to get us quite a bit through the technology tree and set us up for the real endgame. And there you have it, the 4th type of science unlocked. And interestingly enough, we didn't actually add a lot of production to our facility this time around. We mostly added spaceships and warehouses now. As you can see, we have transport ships flying up and down now from our actual base up to the sky to our newly repaired space station in order to do some trading and get some resources from there. Interesting twist to the genre. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. But next time around, we will of course be continuing down the technology tree in order to get to the true endgame. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.